Hello, Dr. Welch. This is Joseph Girk, and here is my presentation for the biography assignment. So, I chose to study Abraham Lincoln, and this is the book that it's based off of, The Team of Rivals by Doris Kearns Goodwin. And as you can see, it's a pretty thick book, so I chose to focus on Lincoln's life up until his presidency, as I know there's a lot to cover, but I feel like I got some good material and I'd like to share it with you today. So here's my outline. I would like to talk about how Lincoln defined leadership and also how he learned how to lead. Also like to cover some of the textbook material framework and how that applies to leadership, and then also just give a couple thoughts in a brief critique. So let's get started. So, how Lincoln defined leadership, to me, a simple word that came to mind was liberation. So, as is widely known about Lincoln, he grew up in poverty, was barely attended school because of how much his dad needed him to work on the farm and doing manual labor. But his desire for education and to grow, to get out of his current state, drove him to read every book he could get his hands on, and he really discovered the outside world through his books. And so I think that theme of liberation for Lincoln kind of stayed with him throughout his life. The more he learned and the more he grew, the more he wanted other people to learn as well and realize what was possible. So, um, so I think that goes into his leadership philosophy. Um, like I mentioned before, liberation, and one of the quotes I found that could describe this was how he felt like books helped liberate the mind from his false and underestimate of self. Um, that the great task which the printing press came into the world to perform was this task, and that's on page 51 of this book. Um, and going along with that was economic development. Lincoln for a while worked on a flatboat in Illinois, just you know moving goods back and forth, and he started to realize the the benefits of infrastructure and helping kids get into schools that were organized basically as a way to serve the population. So he felt like economic was important, and another quote about this was that he wanted every American to have an unfettered start and a fair chance in the race of life. That was on page 90. So, so I think his philosophy was really key to his decisions that followed, and his desire, kind of what he wanted to bring people into. So, as was mentioned before, Lincoln basically learned to read by listening to lead by listening to stories and reading the Bible and whatever books he could have. But he also had a great knack for telling those stories and capturing audiences, whether it's his schoolboys or the people that he would encounter as a lawyer throughout his life, just telling stories to to help people learn a point. So he loved capturing his audiences, taking them with him on a meaningful adventure. Um, and sometimes even in a confrontation, he would tell a story to help bring the point around so that people could understand. And I think he even also got that from his father as well, that Lincoln's dad was a good storyteller. So he also just loved reading books, and that helped him to just have that kind of knowledge that he could lead people well. So comparing this to the textbook by Kouzes and Posner, credibility was very evident with Lincoln. He did practice what he preached, probably because he practiced a lot and then was able to preach based off of what he did. So he was not really rich or powerful. He was at the beginning just very honest and humble, but what he had, every time he had something, he would use it to the best of his ability. So, for instance, every time he could get a book, he would read it completely and really try to understand its meaning. Whereas, some of his other rivals, they had entire libraries, but maybe they didn't take as full advantage of what they had as Lincoln did. So another thing, like I've already mentioned, his ability to inspire was really useful for him. And I'll talk about that in a minute, but another point was how he was forward-looking and how he challenged the process. He did that both for individuals and for the nation in general. As I mentioned about the infrastructure, he wanted to challenge people to imagine a better connected America, and so that there could be success. And another way he challenged the process was his choice of his rivals, his political rivals, to be part of his leadership team was really unheard of. But by bringing them in, he was able to build a stronger team of people that really helped his presidency. So, his ability to think forward was huge. Did he build a team and strengthen others? Like I just said, yes. He also, from his days as a grassroots politician in Illinois, Lincoln engaged in every aspect of the political process, from the most visionary to the most mundane. That's on page 89 of the book. He was really focused on relationships and people, influencing young people whenever he could. Excuse me. And his ability to maintain those relationships really helped him throughout his life. One example of this would also be one of his political rivals that became his treasurer, Salmon Chase. Lincoln invited Chase to his house in Illinois before he started the presidency to talk with him, and Chase was just impressed with how humble and free the conversation was, that Lincoln was willing to listen to him and his concerns, and they became connected in a way that helped in the presidency. So forging unity was key for Lincoln in every aspect of his life, but he learned that from a young age. So a little bit of maybe critique. It's well known that he was stubborn, and I'm sure he had to just be very, very stubborn to get to where he was, but sometimes that maybe hurt him a little bit. I read an example about how when he was a senator in Illinois that he continued to want to focus on economic development even in the midst of a recession, when the state didn't have very much money, or was even trying to sell land because of the debts and the things that were happening, and how his continued focus on wanting to improve roads hurt his popularity and maybe a little bit of his credibility with other politicians. It's also was mentioned how he was just very ambitious, and he felt that the best thing he could do with his life was to be remembered by others for making a mark. And from a Christian worldview, we believe that what we do matters on this earth, but it's because we want to please God and make His glory known, and not basically our own name and our own reputation that pales in comparison to what He has done. So that's a little bit of my thoughts. I felt just really encouraged by reading about his life, because sometimes it's tempting to feel like, where you are right now doesn't really matter, or if you're not amounting to much, in the grand scheme of things. But how Lincoln continued to learn where he currently was, and to learn lessons well, and not throw in the towel, even though Lincoln did struggle with depression, and his great ambition sometimes left him feeling worthless in his current state. He continued to persevere and to just do well with what he was given. So I really appreciate the opportunity to learn, and I really am thankful for this class. I think I am learning a lot about Lincoln and how he defined leadership. How he learned to lead, I think, is very inspirational to us, and maybe something for this day and age of instant gratification. Really absorbing something well is remarkable and commendable. Also, his leadership framework, just how liberation was a theme for him. I really appreciate that, and his legacy definitely lives on. So it was great to be able to share my thoughts with you today. I appreciate the time, and I hope you have a good one. I'll talk to you online. Bye.